Hey folks, welcome back to the Mac and Mike show. Obviously, I'm Mac because I'm the good-looking, handsome, statuesque, tall guy, and he's Mike, who's not any of those things. So the reason, well, we're going to talk today is I don't know what you want to call it. I want to call it almost anti-Americanism, but I think there's a little bit of Trump derangement system built into it as well. Last week, I saw an interview that CNN had done with a gentleman by the name of Thomas Friedman, who is a journalist and a opinion writer for the New York Times. Now, I've read a lot of Thomas Friedman's stuff for years. I think he's a very intelligent man. I like to read his opinion. His opinion sometimes, maybe most of the time, is different than mine, but that's how you educate yourself. You educate yourself by listening to people who have different points of view, and from those different points of view, you can roll that around in your brain with the information that you already have, maybe you've already decided, and see whether or not it changes anything for you. But at any rate, when this thing popped across my screen, this is an interview with Thomas Friedman, I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll listen to it. Again, Thomas Friedman of the New York Times. And the questioner from CNN said, Thomas, they're friends, and he said, Tom, I'm interested in your thoughts on what's going on in Iran. And for the first minute and a half, Thomas Friedman says how terrible Iran is, how they do terrible things, how he doesn't want them to have a nuclear weapon, how he says that they are bad actors in the region, that they do terrible things to their own people as well as their neighbors in the Middle East. And he says, I wouldn't feel bad at all if the current administration in Tehran, in Iran, was toppled and was no longer in charge. He said, but here's the problem that I have. The problem that I have is that I don't want Donald Trump or BB Netanyahu to get any credit for the evil, tyrannical, terrible government in Iran being toppled, because them getting positive feedback for what they've done may give them some benefit. And then he went on to say that Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu are evil, terrible people. And he said, I don't want them to accrue any benefit from the Iran regime being toppled. Now, you either believe that the Iran regime, the theocratic government of Iran, is a danger to the American public, or you do not. And you either think it is a problem for our foreign policy in that arena, or you do not. You think that the government, the theocratic government, is terrible not only to their population but also to their neighbors, or not. And you think that the theocratic government in Iran is a bad thing because they are the leading supporter of terrorist organizations in the Middle East and beyond, or not. And my difficulty in watching Thomas Friedman speak this way is that you either want what's good for you and your friends or not. It's hard to say, I'd rather, and I think people can interpret what he said this way, I would rather not see the terrible government of Tehran, of Iran, be toppled than have Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump get any kind of credit for having been the ones that accomplished this. I would think that a good thing for our nation should be celebrated by everyone, not divided by what part of the political divide you sit on. The other thing I thought this led me to was, when people talk about Trump derangement syndrome, I think this kind of attitude and these kinds of words coming from Thomas Friedman is where the concept and the idea of Trump derangement system germinates from. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, that's one aspect of Trump derangement syndrome. I've got a friend that was military, a pilot in my unit. I'm not sure he didn't serve as long as I did, at least not in that unit. And he's a never Trumper. I get the same sense from him. He sends me a lot of personal messages by Facebook Messenger, and I've stopped responding to them. I don't even look at them; they're all stacked up. and I'll only respond to him if he says something publicly on Facebook. But one of the things that sort of dawned on me about him is when he's doing this kind of thing, and I don't know if it's true with Friedman, I said, you're self-medicating by throwing this stuff at me. And I said, I'm running out of Narcan, buddy. It's just the way it is. And there's no way to help, people. And you and I were just speaking with my oldest stepdaughter, and we were on the back porch. And even though she's not a veteran, she understands that, maybe it's better not to kill a whole bunch of people if you can help it. Because that's one of my never Trump friends. He says kill them all, let God sort them out type mentality. And I'm not sure if he's ever seen the dead bodies, but it's like when you smell the dead bodies, you see the dead bodies. Kind of gives you a little bit different perspective on life and death and what war really means. So, yeah, there's another saying that people hate Donald Trump, or in this case, BB Netanyahu, more than they love their country. But I would say in this particular case, it's more than they love humanity. And you and I, as Christians, I think we can relate in that our command is to love one another, And I see it as there's a biblical thing. I don't know if Jesus said it or Paul. I think it was Jesus said in through John, maybe in Revelation, their love has grown cold. And I think that's what we're seeing. When you can't, and Jesus said, not to call what is evil good and good evil. So to place evil over top of anything good is, to me, a symptom of Trump derangement syndrome and just derangement in general. That's my thought.
Mike, obviously in America, we have freedom of speech. And people on both sides of the political divide are welcome to voice their opinion, whatever that opinion is. Even if I think it's stupid, they probably think my opinion is stupid. So there can be stupidity on both sides. But I think there is a line that people in the media and people in the general public should probably not cross. And what I'm talking about is we had this ceasefire declared for Iran, and America stopped the bombing. And Representatives of America and Iran met in Islamabad, Pakistan, to talk about the terms for an ending of the conflict that was ongoing in Iran. And right around that time, they announced the ceasefire, and they announced this high-level negotiations in Pakistan between the two primary participants in this battle. You have to give some part of that battle to Israel as well. But the United States was really the big dog, the lead dog in this show, and they met with the people in Iran, supposedly the people who were authorized to negotiate for them. And here's the point I'm trying to get to, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get to it. All we heard from all the media giants was this almost irreverent Taco Tuesday, right? They were meeting on Tuesday, and they kept talking about Taco Tuesday, the two-stepper that when Donald Trump sets a line you dare not cross, and then he tiptoes and walks back and doesn't enforce it. Now, I would say that that's a mischaracterization of Donald Trump's typical response to those kinds of things. You want to see somebody that draws a red line and then lets people walk all over it. Look at the President Obama assertions of red lines that you dare not cross. But the point about the whole Taco Tuesday that was rampant throughout our media is that I think that may have had a possibility of influencing the Iranians into thinking that the American public did not support Donald Trump. And in that whole reportage from all the various liberal outlets, as well as individuals on all social media with the Taco Tuesday, and Trump doesn't have the wherewithal, the guts to stick with his warnings, he'll step back and he'll give them some. I think that whole thing may have influenced the Iranians into thinking we don't have to give America what it's asking for because the public doesn't support this president in this way. And I think, I could be wrong, I may not be correct, but my feeling on this is that those people who, in the old days, in the Cold War days, we would have called that giving aid and comfort to the enemy, Mike. Do you remember those kinds of days when we talked about that kind of stuff? And I think that people who put Taco Tuesday on their Facebook page and people in the media who talked about Taco Tuesday and generally made ridicule and made light of Donald Trump giving a ceasefire so that he could potentially work out a deal that did not include more people dying. And by the way, we're talking about American military, Air Force, Navy, even potentially Marines and ground troops. We're also talking about the Iranians who are participating in this effort, the IRGC and the leadership of the Iranians. We're also talking about the Iranian people. In a war, there are people who die. And it's not always the combatants only who die. Sometimes it's innocent people. We call that collateral damage. So the people in America who were making fun of Donald Trump for allowing this 2-week ceasefire were basically not only ridiculing him for stopping the efforts, but also cheering on, let's have more death and destruction. But the bottom line was, in my opinion, they were potentially weakening the position of the negotiators of the United States to bring this war to an end. And, I don't want to get all excited about this. I don't want to yell from the rooftops. But honestly, I believe that borders on treason. I mean, it's not actual treason. We do have the freedom of speech to say whatever we want. But my point is that if you're weakening the position of the United States negotiator that are negotiating with an enemy combatant, and you are saying things that makes it seem like the leader, the commander of the American side does not enjoy complete support by all the people in America, it may embolden the Iranians to think that they can push for a less severe deal, a weaker deal, and they might be able to get away with it. If, in fact, the American public does not support the president in these actions. And I think that that's a serious issue, and I think that's an issue that people who did that should search their conscience and decide for themselves whether or not, in their behaving in a partisan way, in their using Mike's terminology, Trump derangement system, did they in fact prolong the potential of this war to continue? With their actions and with their ridicule, did they say and do things that would embolden the Iranian opponent and cause this conflict to go on longer? Are they the ones responsible, for example, around saying no ships will pass through the Straits of Hormuz? We control that now. Of course, Donald Trump trumped that by saying, okay, you won't let our ships go through? No ships will go through. We'll do our own embargo. But can you envision that those words from many different sources in America may have emboldened the negotiators of our enemy and lessened the possibility of a negotiated settlement?
Well, it's possible. I think the average person in negotiations knows that in the short term, they're dealing with Donald Trump and his administration, and whether or not the American people are 100% behind it or not is not going to make a difference in the short term. In the long term, they hope to wear you down, obviously, by causing oil to go up and fertilizer and other things to increase in price. And a quick correction, Trump didn't say nobody's going through. It's just nobody's going through to Iran.
Yeah.
And nobody's coming out of Iran, and that includes China. That includes Russia. That includes everybody trying to do business with them.
Good clarification.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it is an important clarification. Now, of course, maybe the other countries, because of the insurance on the ships, are still not willing to risk leaving the Strait. I don't know. I think that'll ease up soon as we know there's no mines, which we haven't found any yet. Of course, we're also concerned about the drone attacks. But yeah, I mean, there's always been dissent. If you think about it, not 100%, but it's amplified now because of social media too, where people would have dissented before. They had to get out and cause big protests. Now it's just some guy on, like us, some guy in some interview with CNN or some YouTube video saying something, and then other people say, "Oh, I'm all on this guy's side," and next thing you know, I think Jesse Waters quoted the term, "They create an idiot brush fire," because they're just not thinking clearly enough. I mean, if you and I got to sit down with this Friedman guy, I think he'd probably see our point. He's probably not an idiot. I don't know if he's such an ideologue that he would not entertain at least thinking about choosing his words a little bit more carefully. And let's face it, a lot of us don't choose our words carefully, and they just say things. And the more you said this guy's on. What'd you say, a New York Times guy? I never heard of him.
He's a New York Times writer. He does editorial and journalism pieces. And I've read Friedman's stuff for a lot of it. I have a great deal of respect for his intelligence.
Is he on?
Smart man.
Is he on CNN? Another?
No. He works for New York Times. Has been there for a long time. Now he's been a guest. Because of his widely read opinions. Many different news media types will interview Friedman. He was early on with many of our China problems. He was one of the people that did a lot of investigative work on China and what they were doing over there. And again, I found his stuff to be intellectually well done, well researched, and well written. But this is the first time I knew he was a left leaning writer. But the vitriol and the personal animus that he exhibited when he was saying, yeah, I want to get rid of the Iran theocratic government, but I don't want Netanyahu and Trump to get credit for it because they're evil, despicable people. I mean, that to me was really over the top.
Yeah, especially when, comparing evil to evil, even if you did believe that Trump and Netanyahu are evil, which we don't, but even if you did believe that, you have to stack that up against, like, on a scale of 1 to 10. I always say to my kids and grandkids, give me a scale of 1 to 10 on whether you like something or not, believe something or not, because everything truly is a gradation. I guess he went over the 50% mark to think that Netanyahu and Trump are worse than the people controlling Iran, which really boggles the imagination.
It does.
Because what you're talking about is you got a guy that, okay, doesn't agree. He's a leftist. But you learn to respect some people on the left, because they're well thought out. So, that's rare, number one. So, but then the disappointing thing is when you realize somebody that's on the left like that, or somebody that disagrees with you on another subject, maybe not political, suddenly veers off into such a harsh direction that you can't comprehend why the person that went that way. And we have them on the right too. I'm constantly said, "Well, you're one of those MAGA guys," and okay, define MAGA, number one. Yeah. Number two, one thing about me, you think you know everything about me. Kat Timpf said that.
Yeah.
It's a great saying because my opinions widely vary on different subjects, and I'm open to hearing people. But I just can't go far enough to understand what Friedman's saying. It's like, okay. And maybe he regrets it. I wonder. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know.
I don't think so, Mike. It was funny. I was talking to my grandson, who is a very, very intelligent young man. And he's conservative. I think many people in my family tend to be conservative. And I wonder whose influence that was. But at any rate, I said to him, during the negotiations with Iran, one of the things that our negotiating team put on the table was the possibility of not Iran walking away from their nuclear ambitions forever, but walking away for 20 years. And my grandson, who's politically astute, he said something to me that resonated quickly. He said, Pat, he said, if we give them a 20-year deal, he said, the midterms will go badly. And the Democrats will win the White House. He said, so effectively, you're not talking about a 20-year moratorium on nuclear weapons for Iran. You're talking about a 2-year deal, because once the Democrats get in the White House again, they would give it up. And I thought that that was a very astute comment from him, not because I know this to be true, but when you look at the way the Biden administration and the Obama administration treated Iran, you can see how my grandson, who's only in his mid-20s, would come to the conclusion that the Democrats would negotiate and deal with the nation of Iran very differently than the Donald Trump administration did.
Yeah, and even at 20 years, it's ridiculous. I mean, you can't just kick the can down the road 20 years and expect this whole ideology that is thousands of years, or not thousands, but at least 1,600 years old, to suddenly change their position in 20 years. Not going to happen. So yeah, a lot of the Iranians are concerned that we're not going to finish the job, and I don't blame them.
It's not just the Iranians, though.
UAE and others.
It's all of the neighboring nations, including the European nations, who have decided to not support us materially in this war effort. The oil that comes out of the Strait of Hormuz goes predominantly to Europe and to China and to other places other than America. America doesn't use a lot of the Middle East oil anymore because we have alternative sources here in North America and South America that are available to us. So getting oil and gas from the Middle East is a lot more expensive than a much shorter trip that it takes to come from our nation or our borders to the north and south of us. So, allowing the Middle East oil to travel through the Strait of Hormuz benefits other people more than it does us. You would certainly think that the people who benefit from that would be more interested in protecting their interest than having the United States do it for them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, when it comes to Europe, you have that certain segment of the green population that they would love to see oil go to $1 billion a barrel so that nobody could ever use it again. Yeah, I don't know. Of course, Japan's not like that, not as bad as Europe. But yeah, somebody said what China gets, I think it's 18% of its oil from Iran, but 90% of Iran's oil is
Yes.
exported to China.
Yes.
But it's only 18% of what China imports because they get a lot from Russia and other areas.
Well, their demand for energy is so vast
Yeah.
that and while we talk about how much money this blockade is costing the Iranians, like $500 million a day, it's costing China that much or more. If their plants or their manufacturing plants or their manufacturing plants stop or the lights go out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, China's trying to solve that problem. I think they're the world's #1 user of solar and wind energy. I know people have said the opposite of that, but I looked it up on artificial intelligence, and they are the world leader, even above Europe. But that's out of necessity, not because they have some kind of green agenda. But they're also a huge, consumer of oil products as well, because what do they have? 1 billion some people, 1.25 billion, 1.5 billion. And America is still the #1 consumer of oil. We're also the #1 producer of oil, but we still, because of the different types of petroleum products you need, we have to import different kinds, and refineries work different ways. And then you have California, which is so stupid. It gets its oil from where, I forget, where does it get its oil from? It's certainly not the United States.
Most of it is imported. I think most of it comes from the Middle East and from Venezuela and South America.
Yeah, I don't know about South America. Anyway, it's not American. And that's the stupidest thing. See, that's, I don't want to get off the subject. This just popped into my mind. And when you talk about things that you just don't understand, that's another one. Same way, like we know nuclear is the way to go in the future. We should start doing that now. Everybody says, oh, well, A, it takes too long to build a nuclear reactor. Well, then there's no time like the present to start. And number 2, oh, we should wait because we're on the verge of cold fusion, which would be a different type of reactor. We're going to mine the moon for helium-3 and all that kind of stuff. But no, you got to deal with what's available now and start working in that direction.
But the other part of it, Mike, is that there's just not enough energy. I don't care what source energy you're talking about, whether it's traditional fossil fuels, whether it's wind, whether it's solar. What's going on in the world today with AI and data centers and more information being available and more people consuming more and more information from these various sources, we need a tremendous amount of energy in order to power all of these various technologies that are overtaking the world. And what you see in many places is, and I know this doesn't sound logical, but it's true, in many jurisdictions, in many geographic locations, the cost of energy is increasing tremendously for homeowners and individual people because of the great demand of these other technologies for the available energy. And so what you see is the average consumer, their bill goes up because the price is based on supply and demand, and the electricity that's being manufactured or created by all these various sources, all of these new technologies are demanding this energy. And in order to continue to provide homeowners and individuals with this energy that they need to keep the lights on, to run their electric devices in their homes, their computers, their TV, their microwave oven, all those things that run on electricity, electric bills are increasing, in some cases dramatically.
Yeah, mine have. And mine, I looked into it, I'm not doing bad, but I noticed, I think I had a $700 electric bill. My house is all electric. Dead of winter this year. I'm not in the budget plan anymore. It's quite chilly. Yeah, that kind of hit me quick. And then the months before and after were in the 500s. But,
well,
yeah,
here in our area, we had, in 1979, we had the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island, oftentimes referred to as TMI. And the nuclear reactors, the first one, the one that was damaged, was shut down immediately at that time. The other nuclear reactor was shut down sometime later. Well, what we have going on in our area is the company, Microsoft, is reopening, re-energizing the plant at TMI. And it's creating probably 300 or 400 manufacturing jobs, and there's probably going to be a couple of hundred ongoing jobs for people who manage the electrical or the nuclear power plant. All that energy is going to a Microsoft developed AI and data center that is going to be just for them. So think about this. Microsoft, a private enterprise company, is building their own nuclear power plant in which they will use all of the nuclear generated power just to supply their data center and their AI advancement. Now, if there's energy left over, if they make more than they need, they will be able to sell that to the electric grid, and maybe that'll have a positive effect, that is lowering the average bill of the average consumer if cheap nuclear electric is being added back to the grid. But I think what you have to focus on is what Microsoft is doing is in their own best interest. They probably never envisioned themselves as being a power generating company, but they're doing it, one, because they can. And oh, by the way, that was something the Trump administration fast-tracked for these companies that are doing these data centers, creating their own power plants. Because otherwise, the disastrous effects it would have had on not only on the grid, but also on the consumer bills would have been outrageous. Mm-hmm. So what Trump did, even though most people don't know anything about this, what he did was authorized and fast-tracked these power plants to support these data centers and AI advancement. So the point I'm finally trying to get to, and I know I went around my elbow to get to the end of the story, is that what you need to focus on is energy in all its various types. There's not enough. There's never enough. And I think what we're doing now, people will recognize years later from today that what we did to Iran was a good thing because people, there's so many people, so many things that people don't put together. Do you know what EMP is, Mike? Of course you know what EMP is. Of course you know it because you were in the Air Force all those years. A strategically placed EMP device in the air above the United States of America can render completely unusable and unworkable electronic devices for a huge geographic area. And so you don't have to drop a nuclear bomb on New York City. You drop a nuclear bomb 8 or 12 miles in the atmosphere above New York City, and all the computers are fried. What's more effective? I mean, if you drop a bomb, you can't use that geography forever, maybe, a long time with the half-life of the radiation. But if you do an EMP, all you do is stop everything from working. It's a terrible thing, and we have to be prepared for that. And if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, they could potentially do something like that. And so...
Yeah, that's 100%. That's something that people don't think about. And yeah, I've known about this, you know about it, and the public doesn't think about it by and large. The news is not speaking about that particular scenario, and I think they should. Because I was a survival instructor too, so you can just imagine, and I know you want to close this up, just tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people, because it won't just affect the United States, it'll affect Mexico, Canada, and other areas, will starve to death. You know, people don't know how to survive. How many of you guys know how to go out and do your own hunting and fishing? You know, and you couldn't transport anything, you couldn't have refrigerators. You know, how many people know how to preserve everything? It'd be a slow, painful death, worse than a nuclear bomb killing you. Yeah, take a couple of years maybe in some cases.
What's funny about that is Donald Trump did a X message or a Truth Social message in which he said, if Iran doesn't come to the bargaining table, we will bomb them back to the Stone Age. Well, EMP would have that effect on the geographic area in the United States of America. That area affected. Your car doesn't work, your phone doesn't work, any of your electronics. They no, you don't have a microwave oven, you don't have your clocks, you don't have your TV, you don't have your radio. I mean, it really would be back in the Stone Age. So I guess, though, the message of today's event, even though we kind of went around several different parts of this exploration of this message, be careful when, as a general public, you publicly do not support the government. Whether you agree with the government or not, I think we can all agree that what we want is what's good for America, even if we don't like how we get there. So all of you Taco Tuesday two-step, all those frivolous kinds of conversations that were had both in social media and on public media, on the airwaves, I think those people need to check themselves and decide whether or not that was prudent for them to do that, and whether or not that was giving aid and comfort to our enemy. The other part of it is that, you know, it seems to me that if you want a bad thing, that is keeping the theocratic government of Iran in place, because you don't want your political enemy to get credit for taking that theocratic evil government out, then there's something wrong with your decision-making criteria. With the metric you use for deciding what's good or bad for you, you need to check that as well. If the theocratic government of Iran not being in power is a good thing, both for the Iranian people, for the neighbors in the Middle East, and for America, but you want the theocratic government to stay because you don't want Donald Trump and BB Netanyahu to get credit for it, you need help. You need to check yourself, and you need to reevaluate how you arrive at decisions.
Amen.
I guess we can say Mac and Mike
Out.
out.